Good morning. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our first weekly session. My name is Dwayne Henderson, a member of Cree Lighting's training and education team and host of our e-learning series. For those watching live, happy Friday. Quickly about the session, once we begin, we'll have roughly 15 minutes of content. Our presenter will make themselves available for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And although the attendees are muted, we do encourage you all to use either the chat or the Q&A box to submit questions. Please feel free to do that during the presentation. Today we're going to discuss California Title 20 and 24, and even if you're not in California, both are likely to be influencing your part of the world. So to walk us through that, I'd like to welcome back John Vollers. Good morning, John.
Thanks, Dwayne. Good morning.
And John, before we get started, you want to remind everybody your role in the business, and then we'll get going?
Certainly. Hi, my name is Jonathan Vollers. I'm the technical manager here at Cree Lighting, mainly focused on lighting qualification and running our accredited photometry lab. That qualification focused on Energy Star, DLC, and also submitting products in support of Title 20 and Title 24.
Okay, and perfect. And although, even if you're not in California, right, this is going to be something worthwhile for people to get understanding of.
Absolutely. So one of the important things to understand is California Title 20 and Title 24 do definitely influence the rest of the country, and I'm going to speak to that a little bit more as we move forward. So, great place to start is understand, what is California Title 20, Title 24? Where does it come from? So the California Energy Commission was started in 1975 by the Warren-Alquist Act. Incidentally, by then Governor Ronald Reagan. It is the California's primary energy policy and planning agency. So they basically govern all the energy standards as well as work with utilities and so forth. So the two areas that we're going to focus on today are Title 20, which is the appliance efficiency regulations. And then Title 24, in particular, Part 6, is the building energy efficiency standards. And these two documents affect a lot of what Cree Lighting does and how we approach California, but obviously it also affects what we do for the rest of the country. So speaking of how it influences the way Energy Star works and brands and fits itself. Some of the DOE test procedures, dimming requirements, and TLA and flicker are some of the items that come out of California that either influence directly or indirectly, depending on maybe their requirements or just their vocal engaged people that help drive change not only in their state but also around the country. The way manufacturers approach the California product as kind of a benchmark and typically sell the same version across the country rather than create multiple versions. Sometimes there's slight variations, but ultimately, being able to not have to manage selling into California and then everywhere else is certainly a good marketing plan and tool. Some of the exceptions to that are possibly, because California does drive some higher color quality, some things that maybe people don't feel that everyone needs for every application. So therefore, probably one of the biggest areas I see with lamps is that very low cost products, which are really competing with non-Energy Star LED lamps that are rated for, short lifetimes, maybe up to 5,000 hours max. Or really approaching trying to be competitive with incandescents or halogens, at least be within a certain price range. So those sometimes are marketed and sold outside of California, and then you just have to be very careful about not selling those products into California. Other states are influenced just directly by the code itself, not necessarily, the lighting industry per se. California is the largest population state in the country. It represents roughly 12% of our population. So it is a major market, not only for manufacturers and industry to understand how to approach it, but therefore it just overflows that influence because of its size. And so states do review and kind of talk about implementing some of what California has already done. In particular, like Title 20 for LED lamps, as well as just general service lamps as well, incandescents and halogens. California did institute increased efficacy and CRI requirements for LED lamps, and then a 45 lumen per watt incandescent halogen is in the works as well. And that actually California has been sued by NEMA to delay that. Depending on how that works through the courts and whether they side with California on that, if they do, that result will absolutely open up regulations in other states. And the argument is that the federal government has the right, California is saying they have the right to do what they're going to do. So, depending on that outcome, that may affect a lot of lamp requirements going forward over the next few years. So definitely very influential in what's happening in California, and why, if you're not in California, you're not in that market, you still should at least have an ear to it. But let's get into specifics around Title 20. Again, that's the appliance efficiency standards, and I'm going to really just focus on the LED lighting related items. There's obviously lots of appliances that might fall under this regulation, and we're not going to go into all of those, but the ones that Cree Lighting particularly keeps an eye on or cares about is the state regulated LED lamps, or SLED. And again, state regulated, so it's not federally regulated. The state has taken steps to regulate LED lamps. And then the state regulated small diameter LED lamps. So the SLED, or the first one, would be like an A lamp shown down here. And then the small diameter would be like an MR16 shown here. I also bring up battery backup devices. That influences like an EB unit, or emergency backup battery, for luminaires. They need to be California compliant to Title 20 to be sold in California. There's some charging rate and some different requirements that were put in place the last couple of years. And so if you're selling luminaires with an EB system, you want to be aware that California does have specific requirements, and it's typically much easier to just get a compliant product, and that's what you offer across the country. And then Title 24, as I mentioned earlier, is the building energy efficiency standards. So I'm really just going to speak about how, again, this is the entire building. So we're going to speak to the LED lighting related items and how that, how we look at it, what we care about, and what we try and focus on. In particular, lighting controls, different requirements for building type and applications, understanding, if daylighting is required, occupancy sensing, task tuning, anything, motion sensing. So those type of things, we may not be required as a luminaire or lamp by itself, but we want to help our customers meet those solutions. Ultimately, the building or the implementer is required to meet these, but you want to help them solve those problems. So typically, lighting control is one of the areas we really focus on. Part of that is controlled receptacles or plug load devices. These are required in certain instances. So that's a device that Cree Lighting does offer in our SmartCast package, where we have a plug load device to really help support for California in installations. And then obviously high efficacy lighting. So for building standards, this area, Title 24, it almost seems like it should fit in Title 20 and as an appliance, but just due to some standards and when it happened in the regulatory cycle, LED high efficacy lighting here was put into Title 24, and it's really focused on downlights and downlight retrofit kits. And that performance is identified and tested to something called JA8. So JA8 is the joint appendices, and you can see that here, joint appendices to Title 24. And that is the high efficacy lighting testing requirements. Your typical requirements are in there: efficacy, CCT, lifetime. But probably one of the biggest things that California is known for in this requirement is the high color rendering requirement. It's a greater than 90 CRI requirement and a greater than 50 R9. And for those that are unfamiliar, R9 is a red color rendering and has really kind of been used as a proxy to give preference. So California is really driving in this instance, high quality, high color rendering, or at least trying to, and because they see or believe that success of installations and getting high efficacy lighting in there is sacrificed if you don't have good color quality. People will be unhappy. Customers will avoid it as best possible. So therefore, they feel it's required to drive it along with saving energy through efficacy. And one of the things that's come out in the last couple of years that's been really influential is this J810 temporal light artifacts and flicker testing procedure. It is really the first regulation across the country on TLA or flicker. And this is for general service lamps and downlight retrofits, anything with kind of a standard, medium-sized base, things like that. And it has to be less than 30% flicker at 200 hertz and less. That sounds like a lot, but due to the driver form factor for a lot of lamps, in particular for LEDs, having those electronics in the size that we want, it's actually difficult to get great flicker control or TLA control. So that 30% is appropriate for this consumer kind of product lamp, and the form factor that driver fits within and the topology that could be used. So, but I will note that almost all the products that I've ever seen tested, though they are, they might get upwards of 30% at that 200 hertz. Humans don't really see that. We start to see in that, less than 80 down to, maybe 5 hertz is where we would actually perceive flicker. And almost every product I've ever seen is less than 5% or even approaching 1% flicker. So, really, really pretty good products. And then this requirement, this flicker testing procedure, along with the fact that Energy Star requires testing and reporting, and then NEMA 77 has come along as well, which has, if people are familiar, PST metric and an SVM metric. These three things kind of form the basis for most current lamp and luminaire TLA flicker testing that I would say almost all manufacturers are doing to evaluate their products. So again, highly influential in how the products are developed and how manufacturers are making sure that we can both fit in California and therefore then it's kind of applying to the rest of the country. So all this information goes somewhere. So when the appliance, you need to look up an appliance that needs to be meet Title 24 JA8 or Title 20. They use this Modernized Appliance Efficiency Database, or MABES. So off on the left here, you don't need a user ID or password. That's for me when I'm actually loading products in. You can use this public search, and you can go, and this link is down here for those that are interested. You can use that public search and you search for a particular set of product, maybe a manufacturer, and you're going to get model numbers. You're going to get some CCT information, efficacy information. There's a lot of data in there to find the product you need if you're in California. Or to be honest, it's a great marketing tool to understand the marketplace and what's out there, what controls, what LED lamps are out there, and you can search and look and kind of do some evaluation if you so choose. Also, when manufacturers are typically putting this type of information on our spec sheets, you can see here an example of this California Title 20, Title 24, JA8 compliant, just kind of helping our customers identify what products are listed and that we're compliant to those requirements. So just something to keep an eye out. And in the end, the big thing to understand is when going into California, or just understanding how those type of regulations do apply to some of the products that maybe you're purchasing. Title 20 is a mandatory LED lamp for sale in California. So therefore, you have to be listed on Title 20 to even sell into California. On the flip side, Title 24 is really a building compliance. So, manufacturers aren't responsible to necessarily pick the right products. The owner, the operator, the installer, they're the ones as a system need to meet those requirements. So there's some differences there that people need to understand. And then this is a nice little chart here, just showing, if I were looking at a light source only, not worrying about controls or any other things here, just looking at the LED light engine or integrated lamp or luminaire, where would it fall under the requirements? Must meet JA8, which is Title 24, must meet Title 20. And then you can see here, actually, in this instance, it's really checked to this A lamp to be installed in a new construction or permitted alteration. It really wants to actually be listed in both. So just to be aware, and Cree Lighting does have a number of products that are actually listed on both, under both categories. Now, this chart comes from a great resource if you're interested in learning more about California Title 20 or Title 24. Is called energycodeace.com. One of the nice things that the CEC did to support these regulations is they created this website with a lot of educational resources. You can ask questions to them. There's pamphlets, there's easy breakdowns of different applications. It's really very helpful. So I highly recommend it if you want to get more in depth into either of these specifications. Well, thank you. That's all I have today. Hopefully it was informative, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
Great. Thanks, John. Just to remind the audience, if you do have questions, please go ahead and use the chat or Q&A box to get those submitted, and we'll respond to those accordingly. One question, John, as you were going through that, I was seeing like a lot of residential type products. Is Title 24 a residential code? Is it a commercial code? What's the distinction there?
So it absolutely has residential portions and then non-residential portions. It's low rise. It has multiple different applications. So it's best to look through the table of contents and look for your section that you're interested in.
It's interesting to see like the quality of light, seeing the requirement of greater than or equal to 90 CRI and R9s of minimum of 50. Those typically work against efficacy and the efficiency of the source. Do we see that, or do they give you preference for that, or any allowance for that, or is it still pretty restrictive in terms of efficacy?
So the efficacy for JA8 is, I think, in the 45 lumens per watt or 55 lumens per watt. It's not significantly high. So almost all the products that are in there that are LED related are much higher than the efficacy requirement, and still meet the 90 CRI and 50 R9 of 50 or higher. So and then on the lamp side, it's roughly maybe a mid 80 CRI requirement for minimum, but typically most of the lamps are probably running around 90 CRI and are reaching efficacies, approaching 100 lumens per watt. So though it is a trade-off, there's absolutely a trade-off. The technology is there. And I believe, and I've heard them speak this enough, so hopefully I'm reiterating it correctly, but basically their belief, and they believe their studies have shown that if you're not actually replacing with good quality color quality, you're really not replacing. You're just putting in a new product that's not as good as the old. So just going after efficacy isn't appropriate. That's the way they approach it. So they believe that their customer satisfaction, people being happy with the light that's being produced, is important to them. I think this is somewhat of a reaction to some of the lower quality light CFL efforts.
For sure.
So when LEDs came on the scene, they might have hyper reacted to where they were with CFLs previously, and really driving and because LEDs could do it. And obviously there was a larger efficacy penalty when this started, maybe in 2013, but now they're meeting certainly high levels of efficacy and getting the color quality they want, and probably do have a higher customer satisfaction around that.
Yeah, I think especially when place, and people didn't have much experience around that to make certain that that first impression was going to be a good one, and that you were going to be able to maintain momentum is probably part of the reasoning around that. I'm guessing very similar to DLC. This is kind of data that we're providing, or how mechanically how does this compare to the DLC stuff we've talked about previously?
So actually, because it's a lot of the Title 20 or all the Title 20 stuff is a regulatory, meaning we have to supply it to sell. It's actually free. It's just an Excel spreadsheet of data. I show that our laboratory where we get the information has to be an accredited, listed laboratory with California's Title 20 or CEC, but I just upload the data, and then all our models are listed, and it's pretty straightforward and easy. It's not a horribly onerous. DLC and Energy Star are a fair bit more effort.
Yeah, it's interesting that the impact on cost and quality of product. If you mentioned the NEMA lawsuit, if every state comes out and says, hey, we're going to one up that state because we're going to even have more stringent codes, and every state decides to come up with some code, California mentioned the size of the market, it might not work as well, and you could certainly see from a manufacturer standpoint, the ability to service multiple markets, and maybe making some hard choices where maybe some markets don't get a solution, and then all of a sudden you're starting to restrict maybe the choice and value that these solutions can deliver. So there's probably a balance there depending on that outcome, right?
Yeah, and I would hope that through that legal process there's some compromises, whether or not that's the federal DOE coming in and putting some effort around maybe a little bit higher level of efficacy, and kind of satiating what California's trying to do, so there is a more level playing field across the country. I think that's definitely easier for both consumers and manufacturers. But I think the color quality stuff is going to be more the point of contention, because certainly ADCRI or similar type of metrics there have been seen to be certainly acceptable, and from price standpoint maybe fit most of the market, where California is still driving that higher color quality. So I think that might be where the rub is. But again, sometimes it is easier to just meet that, and you get that 12% market, and then you supply to the rest of the country, and hopefully you're getting some cost benefit by the volume, and ease of marketing it, versus the straight up just cost of using 90 CRI chips, and how many chips you have to do to make an LED lamp.
Yeah. I know what unique to California would be the GU24 socket. Any news to report there? Is that still something that's used often?
It is used. I think that kind of went by the wayside. I mean, it's still part of their requirements, but it is not as big of a drive as it used to be. Their fear was that you could replace with an older technology, higher, something with low efficacy, so higher wattage, and kind of back step. And they didn't want to do that. But I think we're really not seeing that. I think the market has transformed significantly. Even though there are incandescents and halogens out there, I think the general applications are really being dominated by LED, and I don't see that really sliding too far back. So I think that concern has kind of gone away. So you'll still see the GU24, but I don't think it'll ever take prominence.
Yeah, I think that as cost has significantly come down in these solutions, that the value that an LED product can provide today, it makes it less likely that people would want to step backwards. So
yeah, and it would still be a very small portion of the market, so it would be a relatively insignificant wattage. So
yeah. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, John. If you want to advance to the next slide, I'll close up shop for the week.
Okay.
I first of all want to thank John again for his time and the presentation. I also want to thank the audience for joining us. We really do appreciate that. Just as a reminder, we are now on our weekly Friday cadence. So next Friday we'll be tackling or be heading to the gym, I guess, as we tackle the recommended practice around gymnasiums. We won't have a session on Friday, July 3rd. The 4th of July is on that Saturday, so no session on July 3rd. Friday, July 10th, John will be rejoining us. We'll talk a little bit about what you get in terms of the functionality from a Design Lights Consortium's qualified network lighting control system. So that'll be covered on the 10th of July. Lastly, all the content is being recorded. So if you've missed the session, feel free to check out the Cree Lighting YouTube channel for all the e-learning content. If you're not a subscriber, we'd encourage you to do so. With that, again, thanks everybody. We do value and appreciate your time. Enjoy your weekends.